Spoilers for Breaking Bad, El Camino, and Better Call Saul. Breaking Bad follows the story of Walter White, a chemistry teacher whose cancer diagnosis leads him to begin cooking crystal meth with his former student, Jesse Pinkman. The show is told in a pretty linear way, which makes the story easy to follow. However, the recent Popcorners Super Bowl ad campaign has raised lots of questions about the timeline of the Breaking Bad universe, such as when it takes place, whether it's real, and why Walt and Jesse are making chips instead of meth. These questions and more will be answered in this video. So the main problem with the Popcorners ad in terms of the Breaking Bad timeline is that there is contradictory evidence as to where the ad takes place. For example, Tuco Salamanca also appears in one of the ads, but Tuco dies early in Season 2, while Walt and Jesse have their styles from Seasons 4 and 5. Jesse's head is shaved and Walt has his goatee, both of which didn't happen until after Tuco's death. Jesse's clothes are also weirdly reminiscent of his Season 1 or 2 style, so the time period of these ads is really just a mess. There's also the question of why exactly Walt and Jesse are making popcorners. It's unlikely that the profit margin on the chips would even come close to methamphetamine, and they are clearly manufacturing the popcorners out of the RV, which means their operation is extremely small scale. Logistically, it just doesn't make sense. So what exactly is going on with these ads? One theory suggests that the Popcorners ads are the result of a split timeline. According to this theory, everything up until the main timeline of Better Call Saul is unchanged. However, in between the events of Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, Saul kills Hank and steals his identity. The proof of this is in the existence of the show Lucky Hank. Because of this change, the fake Hank never offers to take Walt on a ride-along, and since this is the event that inspires Walt to cook meth in the first place, he never does. However, Walt still needs to pay for his cancer treatment, so he decides to partner up with Jesse to make popcorners. The theory doesn't exactly make it clear why Walt would do this, but we can assume it is because of Jesse's knowledge of the chip industry, which he demonstrates through his familiarity with Funyuns. Obviously, since Walt never cooks meth in this timeline, the chain of events that caused Tuco to die never occur. However, Jesse still knows Tuco through his connection with Skinny Pete, and they end up selling the chips to Tuco for him to distribute. There are a few problems with this theory though. For one, the idea that Saul could kill Hank and take his place is a bit far-fetched. I mean, we know that they were acquainted before the events of Breaking Bad, but there's not much of a reason for Saul to want to kill Hank. Furthermore, the idea that somehow nobody notices that Hank looks, sounds, and acts completely different is pretty absurd. Second, Walt and Jesse using Tuco as a distributor is pretty illogical. For one, Tuco is kind of crazy, and it's shown in the ads that he acts similarly as in Breaking Bad, so it doesn't make a lot of sense for Walt and Jesse to work with Tuco for a legitimate business. It's possible that something in the timeline split caused Tuco to focus on his love of cooking instead of drugs, which is a hobby that both he and his cousin Lalo are shown to have. However, the real nail in the coffin for this theory is the RV. If you look closely, you can see that the door of the RV has the duct taped over bullet holes that are a result of the events of the pilot episode of Breaking Bad. If Walt never cooked meth, then there would be no reason for the RV to have holes in it, so I would say that this theory is debunked. What is more likely is that the ads take place in a dream. This would explain the continuity issues with Tuco being alive, while Walt and Jesse retain their later seasons' appearances. It also explains why many parts of the ads reflect events in the Breaking Bad timeline, such as direct quotes from the pilot and a few other episodes. So, whose dream is this? Well, it can't be Tuco's perspective, since he dies before he ever sees Walt and Jesse look like they do in the commercials. Plus, Tuco never even knew about the RV, so there's no reason for him to dream about it. It's plausible that it's Walt's dream, since he was present for all the moments referenced in the ads. However, I think the most likely candidate is Jesse. Unlike the other two characters, Jesse is alive the last time we see him in the universe. And although Walt could have had this dream prior to his death, perhaps while he was hiding out in New Hampshire, it's really not something that makes sense for him to dream about. Because Walt admits at the end of the series that he liked cooking meth, it would be weird for him to have a dream about he and Jesse making popcorn chips instead. Jesse, on the other hand, is full of regrets about his choices, and imagining a reality where he made snacks instead of drugs is more in character for him. We know that Frito-Lay exists in the Breaking Bad universe, so we can assume that popcorners do as well. So it's not too far-fetched that Jesse would have a dream about them, especially considering his knowledge of chips that I mentioned earlier. So, that's the main mystery of the ad solved, but there are still a few lingering questions. In case you aren't aware, this isn't the first time Breaking Bad has appeared in a Super Bowl commercial. In the 2015 Super Bowl, Walter White appeared in an ad for Esurance. In this ad, he is seen in a drugstore wearing his yellow hazmat suit. Naturally, this raises the question of whether the two ads are connected. Well, unlike the Popcorners ads, there aren't any glaring continuity errors in the Esurance commercial. In fact, I have a reasonably good idea where it takes place in the timeline. Walt clearly appears in a Season 5 form, and he mentions in the ad that he used to own a Pontiac Aztek, which means it must take place after he sells his car in Season 5, Episode 4. So the most likely place that the ad takes place is during the time jump that occurs in Season 5, Episode 8. It is probable that Walt was setting up to cook in this drugstore under the cover of his pest control business when this random lady walked in, somehow not noticing that the store was being fumigated. This would explain why Walt is in his hazmat suit and why he seems surprised when the woman appears. It is likely that she was killed by Todd or someone else shortly after the end of the ad, to avoid her mentioning the encounter to anyone. On the topic of placing obscure pieces of Breaking Bad media, it's likely that this crossover with The Office that appeared during the Emmys in 2011 took place in the same time gap, as it's pretty much the only time that Jesse's whereabouts aren't known to the audience, which means it's the only possible time that Jesse could have traveled to Scranton, Pennsylvania. The Popcorners ad campaign is likely the last piece of Breaking Bad content that we will ever receive, but luckily, I make content that isn't exclusively Breaking Bad related. If you're interested, consider subscribing and showing your support for this video by liking and dropping a comment. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.